Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. I'd like to think of myself as a minor ambassador of beauty. So much so that I actually attempt to structure my life to accommodate beauty's sometimes very unrealistic demands. So when I was aimlessly wandering through a bookstore the other day, the title of this new collection of essays by Katy Kelleher caught my eye immediately. And unfortunately, it did not inspire positive emotions within me. The title of this collection of essays is The Ugly History of Beautiful Things, Essays on Desire and Consumption. Personally, when I see a title that panders in this way to what I now consider the lowest common denominator, I'm gonna get a little bit fired up. I'll admit that I kind of have a hair trigger for this type of rhetoric, but since we do take things often at face value, my first thought is, why do we need to tear down beauty? Why do we now more than ever feel this compulsion to expose beauty for this hideous, malignant creature that it is really behind the mirage? Rhetoric can be very powerful, whether it's a sign that someone holds up in a protest or a title of a book. A few simple words that are expertly or not so expertly strung together can truly move people. It can inspire them to action, to rage, to tears, to change their entire perspective. Rhetoric can also be very reductionist, being used to distill a vast concept or movement into a tagline that may or may not be an accurate portrayal of the truth, which initially I found kind of ironic about the title. I mean, they do say that if you truly understand something, you should be able to describe it simply. But I find that many of these short phrases, these titles, while they make a hard point in a short amount of time, they can still be really damaging. I will start out with my review by saying that I do not like the title of this book, precisely because of how it speaks for my generation and the younger ones. How many of us are just slowly losing our reverence for beautiful things, how we barely respect ourselves anymore, that we do not respect the great religions of the world or their objects. We don't respect our clothes, our historic buildings. If you don't believe me, I'm talking about people that talk about themselves like this. That kind of attitude doesn't come out of nowhere, okay? It's true that we are so forgiving of our flaws and our hardships that we degrade ourselves, and then we just balm it with humor. It means that we choose the easier thing over the hard thing. It's kind of exploiting a hedonistic quality in ourselves that wants to watch the world burn along with all the beautiful things in it. And why? I really ask myself this. Why are we doing this? I believe that many people are losing the connection to beauty because they feel betrayed by it. They feel that it's all this disappointing trick, that reality is preferable, that beauty is a harmful misrepresentation, and that in order not to get hurt or let down, we must come to grips with this ugly truth. And personally, I don't really think that's any way to live, when arguably all of your cognition is an illusion. That reality, your reality, just being a warped and deformed version, waywardly shape-shifting from one person to the next. Why be so keen on removing one of the most abundant fruits of its nature? I just don't understand the suffering. Illusions, may I remind you, also have saved people's lives. The illusion of hope for rescue. The illusions that cement the stasis of the very real-life structural things that allow for our civilization to live in relative harmony and not descend into chaos. Like the illusion of time or morality. Beauty doesn't just trick us, it also inspires awe. It inspires belief and the proliferation of our species. And again, beauty saves lives. It provides people with purpose, like it did for Katy Kelleher, the author of these essays. Now, I know I was giving Katy a lot of shit for this title, but honestly, it posed a serious existential question that I needed to address, and I want you all to consider. When I saw the title of these essays, it inspired me to change everyone's mind about beauty, honestly. I wanted to get the book, listen to what Katy had to say, and if she truly felt betrayed by beauty, then I wanted to know what the hell her problem was. I wanted to prove her wrong and bring life and hope back into the hearts of people who feel that beauty is a sham. But you know what? Despite that clickbaity title, I was all wrong about Mrs. Kelleher, and I'm so happy that I was. Just within the introduction, I was turned all the way around, and I gained immediate respect for the author. I initially thought it was her desire to kind of degrade beauty as a method to help society cope with its crimes. through this kind of shared realization of ugly truths through our shared suffering. But in fact, this collection of essays was actually her attempt to inform the public of the goings-on behind the scenes, the elements from which beauty is forged, obviously not all of them being easy to stomach, by revealing the methods, the cultural associations, and her frequent intellectual commentary. She's very adamant about being just as awe-inspired by beauty as she is horrified. Katy makes it abundantly clear, and it's kind of the core of her whole thesis here, that beauty, the grotesque, the macabre, are all inextricably intertwined. And in her own words, it makes beauty more poignant. A common theme throughout her essays that I adore is this kind of boundless empathy that she has for her desires as well as our desires as a whole. She's not here to shove her moral high ground in your face. She's here to tell you that she desires objects and ideas. She is a consumer just like the rest of us. And she wants things and desires things even if they're bad or immoral. And I think in today's day, I think that takes a lot of courage to say that. Many people today feel that they need to be more moral, more altruistic than their neighbor, than their parents, the past generations, the people in power. When in fact, we are flawed and desirous, just like the objects that we covet. And we all share those qualities, whether or not we think we are better than the next person. This, of course, should not deter you from trying to be a good person. I truly appreciate in her essays her attempt to defend beauty and maintain its sanctity. And even if she's lifting the veil and revealing the dark underbelly of beauty, I am convinced of Kelleher's miraculous ability to do both without undermining one or the other. I think there's a brilliant dichotomy in her writing. It's down to earth and it maintains a childlike wonder and awe that I confess a lot of modern critics really lack. Perhaps this was possible for her because from a young age, beauty was the only reason she even got out of bed in the morning. In the introduction of the book that I mentioned earlier, she describes a meeting with her relatively useless therapist. And Kelleher was clinically depressed and at times suicidal. And she revealed in a session that the only reason for her to get up in the morning was that she might experience something beautiful, that she might touch something beautiful. Beauty, along with medication and discipline, saved her life. No matter how many skeletons beauty has in its closet, how mishandled a divine idea can be in the hands of human beings, the beautiful thing and idea matters. We need beauty to survive. Beauty provides us harmony. And I believe there are many things to be said about beauty. You could fill an entire library with books about what beauty has done for humanity, its miracles as well as its trespasses. Beauty saves, though. It doesn't have to be a beautiful object that you buy in a store, but it can be. It can be an idea even, an idea that's sold to you, but we need it. In fact, this whole collection of essays by Kelleher seems kind of like a story of the anti-hero. And that's maybe that's just the best that we can do right now in a society that's so upset with the systems that cause so much harm and yet also provide us beautiful things. I have learned so much from these essays. I don't think there's anything personally more gratifying to me than learning about some useless knowledge about beautiful things. It's one of, if there's a hierarchy for pleasure, that's at the very top for me. Some useless knowledge from this book would be learning about how Venetian royalty found it fashionable to dedicate rooms to mirrors. Mirrors that were lined with silver and mercury and tin. Obviously very poisonous substances to work with, and many people died. Another thing I learned, which I think this is crazy, is that there's an entire chapter that's dedicated to shells. And I learned that the shells of mollusks are not just their home, but it's hypothesized that it's a physical documentation of their memory, which is, what? That is fucking insane. Apparently the English used to drink gin for breakfast, and during the trade with China, they started drinking tea instead. Wild. That's insane. That's so crazy. I want to drink gin for breakfast and that be socially acceptable. And so much more. I'm just listing a couple things. There is so much in this book. It's so well researched. And you can tell it's very obvious that Katy Kelleher has an obvious obsession with beautiful things, objects, their history, and goes farther than most people would in learning about it. These pieces of information don't really do much for the average person, sure. But for me, and I think for my followers, which is why I'm doing this video, these pieces of information, I feel like I've gained something by knowing them. I've said in another video that I feel more beautiful by being near beauty. And I also feel more beautiful by just filling my brain with beautiful knowledge. Some women gain from Botox and fillers, a little 15-minute intermission that makes you feel more youthful and feel better about yourself. I get that same feeling when I'm filling my brain with small sentences that detail beautiful, useless information. Just long forgotten, esoteric tidbits that are like these gemstones that I keep in a velvet padded trinket called my mind. Kelleher seems to understand our relationship with beauty and its darkness better than most people. Beauty is often mixed with more sinister things, which gives them what she calls a kind of dark glamour. And perversely, this tainted quality also gives them a certain degree of prestige. I personally think that this interweaving of beauty and maligned things is more intrinsic to our animal nature than we'd like to think. Some people would say that our processing of beauty, being able to say that something is beautiful, to have that cognitive ability, is a higher cognition. I myself have said that, and it is, but it also isn't. And the theory of reductionism is an absolutely fascinating subject to learn about when it comes to our brain's response to art. But that's definitely a subject for a different video. I'm not going to get into like neuroscience. But the more I read Katy's essays, as well as do my own research, we have a very well documented obsession with beauty, attraction, decay, death, all that jazz. The best-selling fragrances in the world, for example, have included massive amounts of indoles or have used flowers that contain a lot of indoles, which are compounds that smell like rot or sex, like sweaty sex. That's just one example of our intrinsic attractions. We like our beauty with a side of ugliness and horror. That makes beauty more dimensional, more dynamic, and interesting. And beauty being a deteriorating yet natural force in the human world is a little theory I have about why beauty is often heinous and maligned. There's a video above if you want to delve into that. Now, because this collection of essays is just as much about beauty and its history as it is about consumerism, I want to close this review with a little something that Kelleher said in chapter 3. Katy divides herself, and by proxy, all lovers of beauty and consumers, into 3 categories. One being the overly consumptive glutton who desires uncontrollably. The second being the one who does not desire, but instead laments the wrongdoings of man and all the beautiful things that he has created from his wrongdoing. And the third being this like Kantian persona, which she considers as like an ideal self, like a holy entity which just perceives beauty passively, witnessing and appreciating beauty in this very pure, or the most pure way possible. I felt that this was important to note because, again, she realizes as humans, we are multifaceted. But in a time where we feel so obligated to be our best self all the time, to be our most moral self, as well as being incredibly unforgiving of those who do not perform to our, at times, very unrealistic moral standards. I think this approach, this kind of internal trinity, holds us accountable while offering leniency for our mistakes and for our arrogance. I like that Katy is able to be deeply upset by beauty's transgressions, appreciate the illusion of the beautiful thing, and also at times stand by passively in the sublime bliss that beauty can instill in you. It's an absolutely fabulous book. It's a meteor. I definitely suggest all of my followers read it. You guys ask me about books all the time, and I don't think I've ever done like a singular book review, but I made like the initial question that I had in the beginning about like, why do we want to destroy beauty? Why, like, is this like a movement to like just unearth realism and that being just like the basis of like all of our perception? I felt compelled to make this the video this week, and This book is relatively new, or this collection of essays is relatively new. It just came out, and I think it's an important visitation of the past to remind us of how a lot of the most readily consumed things, as well as luxury things, are made, what their history is. And it's also, I think it's a great thesis when it comes to our relationship to beauty in the modern age, as well as the relationship we've always had with it. So yeah, if you read it, or if you want to read it, whatever, let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think about the initial question that I posed in the beginning. Leave it below. And don't forget to like and subscribe as always. And I'll see you guys next week. Ta-ta.